1045 The Team, your home for New York sports. Cool book just landed on my desk. I finally pried it from Gaz's grubby mitts. Upon further review, the greatest what-ifs in sports history. Join us right now, the author, Mike Pesca, host of the Slate podcast. Host of the Slate podcast and The Gist. So, Mike, I as I'm going through this, I see it's not all written by you. It's primarily written by you, but there's reports of these events if things had gone differently?
This is what I did. I got 31 of the sharpest minds out there thinking about sports, and we talked about different chapters that were in their wheelhouse and their expertise, or just I contacted kind of funny, interesting people I knew. I say, you ever consider this? And they would come up with an idea. So, and they're all written from different perspectives. So if you read Katie Baker's piece on what if Gretzky hadn't been an Oiler, which actually is really plausible because of the rights with the WHA, it reads as a straight piece, okay, she's laid out the case, what if he had not been an Oiler? Whereas Rob Nyer writes, what if the DH were in the National League? He talks about the history of the DH not being in the National League. The owner of the Cardinals, I think, was on a fishing trip when the vote happened. That's real. And then he kind of plays out what happens. But then there are other chapters which are pretty much humor pieces. Like Jesse Eisenberg writes a piece about being a 12-year-old kid and writing a fan mail letter to the Phoenix Suns and have that screwing up Dan Marley's mental mindset. And Bob Ryan writes a piece. So he covered the Blazers and covered Walton. So he does a little introduction telling you how great the Blazers were. People might not realize it. And then he writes the piece as if they had just won the 79 championship, and it's byline, Bob Ryan, Boston Globe, June 2nd, 1979. So all different styles, all different writers, all different sports, all different time periods.
Mike Pesca with us upon further review. The cover of the book itself grabs you right away, because it just kind of, like for a diehard sports fan like myself, to see Barkley holding up the NBA trophy, to see Clark not make the catch, to see Buckner actually field the ball. Like, how much fun did you have with Photoshop in this thing?
It was great, and what you're saying really heartens me, because I thought I hoped the cover would work on two levels. Like, if you're not a sports fan and just thinking about buying this book for Father's Day, you see a bunch of sportsy stuff, and it looks iconic, and you're like, oh yeah, I think I've seen Bill Buckner or Dwight Clark jumping in the air. But if you are a sports fan, there's all these hidden messages, like Kevin Dyson is in the end zone, not tackled on the 1-yard line in that Super Bowl. And when we were thinking about, so then I had the idea of who's holding up a trophy, because you could really Photoshop anything. What would be the most iconic player who's never won the championship in his sport? And I was thinking it's probably Ernie Banks, but the World Series trophy as it exists now didn't exist then, so that's kind of weird, right? And I think, who do you think the most iconic or best NFL player who never won a trophy was?
Oh, for me, the Lord of No Rings, Donovan McNabb.
Oh, don't do that to me. No. Dan Marino, stop that.
That is correct. The second answer is correct. You might wish to jab the former Syracuse player, but yes, it is Dan Marino. But I don't think, because, NFL players and helmets, I just think there's something about Barkley and how Shaq always rides him for not winning that trophy. There's something about putting Barkley on the cover. I was between Barkley and Ewing holding that Larry O'Brien trophy, and we went with Barkley. So this is a great in-joke, yeah.
Mike Pesca with us, and it's funny because I bet you Barkley's pictured that many times as well.
I'm trying to get it into his hands because, they're going to have one of these fights on the TNT show, and then wouldn't the coup de grace be Shaq holds up the book, which looks like, maybe a postage stamp in his hands. And then you could zoom in on Barkley holding the trophy and they all laugh at him. That would be it. That would be my moment.
Well, speaking about moments, you as a sports fan, is there a moment that you wonder personally, what if my team or my athlete had done this or that, and how much different your life could have been as a sports fan?
Yeah, and that was one of the inspirations. So I'm a New Yorker, and as you guys know, I guess a lot of Albany people, Syracuse people, upstate people, they go to the Bills, they have different allegiances, but I'm a New York City guy. So I could have either gone Giants or Jets, I go Jets. I could have either gone Mets or Yankees, I go Mets.
Oh no.
And then the Knicks, they're no good, and my college team's St. John's. So what I'm laying out for you is that in my life, I've witnessed one championship, right? And it's not as if I'm saying I'm a long-suffering, whatever, Cubs fan pre-2016, but I worked for NPR for 10 years, and I covered, I think, 6 World Series and 7 Super Bowls and a ton of Final Fours and the World Cup, and I'd be around these championship teams. And it just hit me one day, it would be nice to have this in my life. What if? And then I had kids. I'm like, what am I doing to these poor kids, making them Mets fans and Jets fans? And so I do think What If serves as this little bit of redemption or hope or deliverance like spring training does every year and hope springs eternal. What If is the salvation of the fan who's fated to root for the losing team.
See, it's a great kickoff point to conversations. Mike Pesca with us. The book is called Upon Further Review, The Greatest What Ifs in Sports History, because as soon as I saw the book, I was like, there's got to be a chapter on the tuck rule.
Well, yeah. So there's a chapter that touches on that. And what the chapter is what if Bledsoe doesn't get hurt? What if Brady doesn't take over? And that chapter, by the way, we have a podcast Upon Further Review. It's not just reading from the book. It's kind of reporting out the book and doing chapters from the book in different ways. And I think you'd like this because we take that chapter and turn it into a fake Boston sports talk radio show. So we get two comedians, and they're hosting the show in current day, but the Patriots haven't been to a Super Bowl in 20 years. And then they have a guest on the show, and the guest is the guy who wrote the chapter for the book, Steve Kornacki. And Steve Kornacki comes on this fake radio show, and he says, I've been looking at the records, and I really think the key to the Patriots, where it all went wrong, is they never started Tom Brady. And these two Boston sports loudmouth guys like, Tom Brady, what are you talking about, Tom Brady? You ever see him with his shirt off? And it goes from there.
One of my favorite parts about this book is that there are so many other what-if scenarios in sports history. Could we be seeing a sequel to this book if the success is what we think it might be?
Yeah, I think so, and I've talked to some people. It's great because one spurs another, and then it all spins out. And I think of these all the time. Like I'm just waiting to talk to you guys, and I see that you went to Syracuse, right?
Yes, yep, from Syracuse, born and raised.
From Syracuse, right. And I'm thinking, okay, what's a good Syracuse one? And then I say, holy cow. There's chapter 2 of my book is What If Football Were Deemed Too Boring in 1899? And it's plausible, by the way. It was just a blood sport where you gained 3 yards at a time. And it's a funny essay by Jason Gay of the Wall Street Journal, and he focuses on things like the foam finger industry and how church attendance might be good if there were no football. But, if there were no football, I think lacrosse is a plausible sport to have been the national sport. It serves a lot of the same purposes. And the fascinating thing is, we'd have had the best player in both sports, wouldn't we? Like
yes,
Jim Brown would have been the best lacrosse player of all time.
And it's funny you bring that up because like we have the lacrosse championship coming up this weekend. Well, not championship, but the next round. Albany trying to advance past Denver, and you're seeing the growth here now. Finally, where we're getting 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people to go see the game. I think it's an interesting point. Lacrosse probably would be the big game.
Yeah, it has everything, and it doesn't have that sustained head trauma that football does. And there's another chapter in the book about football that I asked Nate Jackson, ex-Denver Bronco, to write. What if football were invented today? And he has 4 downs, and a touchdown's still worth 6 points, but he opens it up, and he doesn't have obese linemen, and he has all the players being like Swiss Army knives, like basketball, like players like Jason Tatum and Giannis, where tons of players throw the ball, and there's less head trauma. I think it's interesting. I think it's lacrosse-like, and I think that another really interesting thing about that, how many kids are good at both and are, pushed into football because that's where the glory is in the NFL. There's money in the professional league. There are so many more spots in college. Things would be very different if lacrosse were the national sport other than football.
I feel like more than just a sequel book, there's like a board game in this. Like I feel like there's a lot. Like I think there's an Upon Further Review franchise waiting for you, Mike.
Off-Broadway musical. Now, I want to throw an idea at you. I think Gaz's Grubby Mitts would be possibly the least effective menu item at a sports bar. I don't know what they would be, like a basket of fries. We should have Gaz's Grubby Mitts.
Well, Mike, he's on a wedding diet right now, so they're as least grubby as they've ever been.
I might eat the book.
Gaz, I've been doing some research on you. I saw you were a political science major.
Yes.
We have a chapter, What If Nixon Were Good at Football? And it's not one of those funny chapters. It's reported by Princeton historian Julian Zelizer. And episode 1 of the podcast, which is up now, has Leon Nafak, who's a reporter who did a podcast called Slow Burn. He takes it on. It's fascinating. It totally changes his personality. I think you'd be really interested in that one if you were good at football.
I definitely would be interested in that. Playing college football, the Syracuse ties. Mike, you're coming back on the show. We got a lot more to cover.
Yeah, because we got to talk about if the USFL and Trump make it. How different is the country today?
More.
So big. If he just gets the Bills, maybe he calms down.
Right. Whole different world. Mike Pesca, again, the book is called Upon Further Review, The Greatest What-Ifs in Sports History. Love the concept, love the book. It's really cool, Mike. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.